Welcome to the Vintage Hollywood Archive. The globally known star Patricia Neal was one of Hollywood's biggest stars on stage, film, and television for more than 6 decades. She is most known for her role of Amma Brown in the movie HUD, which earned her an Academy Award in the year 1963 for Best Actress. However, amongst glitz and glamour, there was so much more that could be seen by the public to her life. Why Patricia Neal and Gary Cooper had the most tragic love story. Make sure to watch the video until the end, and if you're new here, don't forget to join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Vintage Hollywood Archive channel. Patricia belonged to a coal mining town, which does not exist now. She came from a working-class family and had blue-collar roots. Her rural upbringing, perhaps, and hard life did show up in her performance on stage. She had a beautiful, husky, Lauren Bacall-type voice, which was her most significant feature, as most think. Neal did not simply do conventional romance. Even her most typical romance movie, called The Fountainhead, was not what you would expect it to be. The movie revolves around her and the male lead Gary Cooper played. It is about a domineering and controlling woman who is fighting unrequited feelings for a man who does not show much interest in her at all. She is perhaps most famous for Breakfast at Tiffany's, in which she starred beside Audrey Hepburn, but there is so much more to Neal's career than just that film. Neal was a phenomenal actress, so phenomenal that her stage presence and aura were just enough to put the audience under her spell and make them watch the entire movie. The way she moved, the way she talked, and the way she expressed herself were all very exquisite and never seen before. Patricia did not need to be the protagonist or the main star. She could play the antagonist, the secondary lead, the side role, anything, and she would ace it. She was, no doubt, one of the greatest stars of the silver screen and her era. No one could do it like Patricia could. What Patricia brought to the stage mostly could only try. She became the character that was given to her, adapted into her role, and you could practically see her bringing the character on script to life. Patsy Louise Neal was born on the 20th of January in 1926. Even in her adolescence, growing up in Knoxville, Tennessee, she was well aware of her interest in acting and often recited soliloquies at church and various gatherings. As a Christmas present from her parents, she was given acting lessons at the age of 12. Her teacher was Emily Mahan Faust of Knoxville, a local woman who did not have much knowledge regarding the art. Patricia, however, deemed Emily and her college drama coach, Alvin Krauss, among her greatest inspirations. 2 years later, after studying at Northwestern University and doing summer theater work in Pennsylvania, she headed for New York. She got her first ever job there as an understudy for the 2 main female parts of Voice of the Turtle. Now she called herself Patricia instead of Patsy Louise, and she was cast by the Theater Guild in the summer theater production of Devil Takes Whistler, where she was seen by Lillian Hellman, Richard Rodgers, and Eugene O'Neill. Shortly after, she accepted an offer from Miss Hellman to play in another part of The Forest, for which she received several awards, including a Tony and the Drama Critics Award for Best New Actress. She had already become a star, and she was not even 20 yet. Her most successful stage in 1946 led to many offers from Hollywood, where she signed with Warner Brothers and proceeded to make 13 movies in the next 4 years, including John Loves Mary and the Hasty Heart of Ronald Reagan, The Fountainhead and Brightleaf with Gary Cooper, Diplomatic Courier with Tyrone Power, and Operation Pacific with John Wayne. While she continued to appear in films, both in Hollywood and England, she returned briefly to the stage where she did The Children's Hour, A Room Full of Roses, Suddenly Last Summer, and The Miracle Worker. She met the renowned children's author Roald Dahl during this time, and they were married on July 2nd in 1953. However, tragedy struck thrice. A taxi hit their infant son, Theo, while he was in his carriage and caused him severe injury, requiring him to undergo rehabilitation. The eldest of the 5 children, Olivia, came into contact with measles encephalitis and died at the meager age of 7. Reluctantly deciding to go on with life, she continued her acting career and won an Academy Award as Best Actress in 1964 for her phenomenal appearance with Paul Newman in HUD, and they filmed the movie called In Harm's Way with John Wayne, Kirk Douglas, Henry Fonda, and Larry Hagman. At the height of her success, when she had started work with director John Ford, Annie Bancroft, and Eddie Albert on MGM's 7 Women, tragedy struck once more. On February 7, 1965, when she was 3 months pregnant, she suffered a series of strokes which left her partially paralyzed. Rigid and determined, she began a successful struggle through years of rehabilitation. Her 5th child, Lucy, was born healthy. In the year 1965, in the middle of a successful film career, she experienced 3 major strokes. Not many expected her to not carry on with her career and quit, or that she would live a quiet life with her children. Many thought that she would never appear on the silver screen ever again, and so much were they convinced of this that they thought she had died after experiencing the several strokes. Some well-known newspapers had even published her death as the main headline for the front pages. Despite the false news spreading like wildfire, Patricia refused to give up. Even in her unconscious state, she was a strong-willed fighter, and she continued breathing, remaining in a coma for 3 weeks. Patricia soon returned to her career and received an Academy Award nomination for the movie The Subject Was Roses with Martin Sheen, and significant television roles including roles in The Homecoming, The Lou Gehrig Story, and All's Quiet on the Western Front, all of which garnered 3 Emmy nominations in total. It was April 1948 when the phenomenal director King Vidor spotted a 22-year-old Patricia on Warner Bros. Studio lot. She had just graduated from Northwestern University after majoring in drama. She had just recently arrived in Hollywood following an Tony Award-winning performance in Lillian Hellman's Another Part of the Forest. Fascinated by Patricia's gorgeous features, King approached the young actress and asked her if she would be interested in doing a screen test for the female lead in his latest film, The Fountainhead, in 1949. Gary Cooper, a handsome actor, had already signed as the male protagonist, and the studio was then considering Lauren Bacall and Barbara Stanwyck to play his lady love. Patricia really liked the script, and about 2 months later, she met with Vidor for sound and photographic tests. Vidor was enthusiastic about her. However, her first ever audition was an utter disaster. Gary Cooper was apparently observing her from far off the set, and he was so unimpressed by her performance that he tried to convince Vidor to not hire Patricia and hire someone else, but he was determined to cast her. He called her again the next day for a second test, and this time around she aced it. Nevertheless, she got the role. The filming of Theater Hit the Fountainhead began in early July in 1948 in Knowles, California, in the state's largest and age-old stone quarry, for what would be the main lead's first encounter in the film. During the 3 days they stayed in California, Patricia suddenly became very aware that she and Gary had a strong physical attraction. Despite his initial impression of her, he had not liked her one bit. When the Fountainhead team returned to Los Angeles to resume shooting on the Warner studio, it became apparent that there was an incredible amount of sexual chemistry between Patricia and Gary. In fact, so much was their sexual tension that the crew thought that they could cut it with a knife. Patricia could almost recall the exact moment when she knew that she and Cooper were in deep love. It happened during rehearsal for the scene in which Roark professed his love for Dominique, kisses her cheek, nose, eyelids, and her hair while she kneels down in front of him in a timid and fragile manner and claims that she too is in love with him. As shooting for the film continued, it seemed like their dialogues began to really reflect how they felt about each other in real life. Gary Cooper was a notorious ladies' man. His ravishing good looks, charming smile, and charismatic manners got ladies riled up. Ever since he had arrived in Hollywood in the year 1925, he had had affairs with almost all of his leading ladies, including Cara Beau, Lupe Velez, Marlene Dietrich, Carole Lombard, and Tallulah Bankhead. After marrying the socialite and high society woman Veronica Balfi in the year 1933, he remained what others thought was faithful to his wife for 9 whole years. It was the year of 1942 when he became involved with the attractive siren Ingrid Bergman during the filming of Sam Wood's For Whom the Bell Tolls. However, there was something that intrigued Gary about Patricia, something about Patricia Neal that made her different from all his prior flings. Not only was she smart, skillful, witty, and gorgeous, but she also possessed an ironic, sarcastic sense of humor that was very attractive to him. Her youth, since she was more than 2 decades younger than him, and diva-like flair both flattered and inspired him, and he fell head over heels for her. On the other hand, Patricia was in with his gorgeousness and thought that he was a very intelligent, poetic, and romantic man who could woo any woman that he wished to warm his bed. Patricia held back from a proper love affair with him until the fountainhead was done with. She thought the aura of the sexual tension between their characters would be absolutely lost if they consummated their affair. At the after-party to celebrate the completion of the movie, it was very apparent that they were in love. Cooper's wife was traveling to New York at the time, and their relationship took effect that night. To avoid transgression that could cause harm to both their careers, they kept the affair as hidden as possible. They would meet at their friends' houses instead of restaurants and other public areas, and were careful not to display their love at studio functions and other social settings, keeping their hands to themselves. In 1949, Patricia met his close friend and publicist named Harvey Orkin at the house of Gene Kelly, which was an extremely hip and famous hangout for the Hollywood celebrities of the era. Harvey took a liking to Patricia, and she was invited to accompany him and his girlfriend on a trip to Aspen in Colorado, where they were to attend a conference given by a famous theologian called Albert Schweitzer. Out of mere confidence, the Harvey was building a new house in Aspen. Harvey, who was completely oblivious to the whole ordeal, called Gary to his home and suggested they all go together for the event. Upon arriving in Aspen, they decided to go for a full tour of the construction site of the new Cooper house. It was strange for Cooper to see his wife and girlfriend together in one place. The air was constricting, and it made him fidgety and extremely quiet. It was that unfortunate night when Gary's wife confronted him. She had sensed something was off by spectating her husband's behavior, and boy was she sure it was because of the gorgeous woman accompanying them. His wife was furious and rushed to tell her daughter of her father's sins. The mother and daughter were so enraged that they declared a literal war against Patricia. To the eyes of the public, however, Rocky continued to be ever so flawless Mrs. Gary Cooper. While Gary and Patricia continued with their fling, Rocky continued with her facade of indifference. In October of 1950, a few months after the movie Bright Leaf was released, a new problem arose when Patricia told Gary that she was expecting and the child was his. The couple were of course very happy with the news. After all, the child would represent their love, and Cooper could use this as an excuse to finally divorce Rocky and marry Patricia. For a few weeks, they carried on with their lives like nothing had changed. But then reality started to sink in, and they began to wonder what would happen if she had the baby. Earlier in the year 1950, Ingrid Bergman, who was a renowned actress, had given birth to a child out of wedlock, and chaos ensued. Cooper called the doctor in Los Angeles and told Patricia he had set up an appointment for her. On a beautiful October morning, she walked up to a small office, handed over money that had been provided by Cooper, and after a few hours, she walked out. She would always regret that day. Later in her life, she would experience spasms of grief and would miss the child till her last breath. If she had wanted anything in her life, it was that child she was carrying for Gary. Soon, Rocky's patience began to wear thin. She yearned to have a loyal husband, but Gary wanted to continue his relationship with his girlfriend. When the couple legally divorced on May 16, the gossip columnist and journalist were in a rush and began finding out about what had led to the breakup. Soon, Gary and Patricia were seen in public together, though he had warned the owners of the various restaurants that they were not to be photographed while they were visiting, or they would be sued. They had avoided intrusive questions and interviews too, but the affair was very obvious. Patricia Neal, who made her way from a small mining town to Hollywood and Broadway, won an Academy Award and a Tony, but whose life alternated between success and failure, died in her home in Edgartown, Mass. On Martha's Vineyard at the age of 84. Her death was announced by her family in Edgartown. the press and public were told by her family and friends that she had lung cancer. Patricia's life was a most tragic one, without a doubt, and while Gary is still remembered to this day, people seldomly talk about her. She will always be known for her spectacular roles. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you were new here. Patricia and Gary were not the only couple who had something to hide. Why Vivien Leigh had the most tragic love story in Hollywood history? Let's find out from this video.